Everyone knows Cleopatra, the seductress who conquered Caesar, the queen who brought Rome to its knees, the last pharaoh of Egypt. But what if I told you she wasn't alone? Other women, just as ruthless, brilliant, and powerful, stood behind her, beside her, against her. Sisters, rivals, queens who fought for the same throne with ambition, intelligence, and blood. This is the story history forgot to tell. The shadow queens who shaped Egypt's fate from behind Cleopatra's legend. Their stories are brutal. The year is 80 BC. Egypt is dying, not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, inevitably, like a wounded animal bleeding out in the sand. The Ptolemaic dynasty, descendants of Alexander's generals, ruled Egypt for 2.5 centuries. But their grip was slipping. Rome grows stronger every year, a republic becoming an empire, hungry for territory, grain, and gold. Egypt had all three. The Ptolemies were Greek rulers of an Egyptian kingdom, foreigners on an ancient throne. Their legitimacy came from might and propaganda, not pharaoh's blood. They adopted Egyptian customs, married Egyptian gods, presenting themselves as a continuation of tradition. But inside the palace, they were anything but Egyptian. They were Macedonian, Greek. Their family dynamics followed one brutal rule: trust no one, especially not your family. In the Ptolemaic court, siblings weren't just rivals. They were threats, competitors for a throne that could only hold one body. Brother murders brother, father executes daughter, sister poisons sister. It's not dysfunction, it's policy, survival of the most ruthless. Into this bloodbath of royal politics, several remarkable women are born. Women who will fight, scheme, and kill for power. Women whose names history will forget in favor of just one, Cleopatra. But before Cleopatra became a legend, she was just one princess among many. And her sisters, they were just as dangerous. Let's meet the family. Ptolemy XII Auletes, the flute player, sits on the Egyptian throne. Weak king, terrible politician, but a survivor who knows how to play the Roman game. He has several children. The exact number is debated by historians, because the Ptolemies didn't always bother recording daughters who wouldn't inherit. But we know of at least 4 daughters. Berenice IV, the eldest, born around 77 BC royal, ambitious, impatient. Cleopatra VI Tryphena, mysterious, barely documented, possibly co-ruler with Berenice, possibly dead before her time. History isn't sure. Cleopatra VII, born 69 BC, the one you've heard of, but in her youth, she's just another princess. Smart, yes. Educated, certainly, but not yet the woman who will seduce empires. Arsinoe IV, the youngest sister, born around 68 BC, close in age to Cleopatra, which means they grow up together, which means they know each other's weaknesses, which means when the time comes, the betrayal will be personal. These women are raised in a palace that's part museum, part fortress, part slaughterhouse. They learn Greek, Egyptian, philosophy, rhetoric. They study statecraft and strategy. But most importantly, they learn one crucial lesson. Power is not inherited. It's taken, and your family will not help you take it. Your family will try to stop you. So if you want to survive, you strike first. The first strike comes in 58 BC. Ptolemy XII flees Egypt. Roman pressure, local uprising, political collapse. The details matter less than the result. The king is gone, and the throne sits empty. Berenice doesn't hesitate. She seizes power, declares herself Queen of Egypt. She's in her early 20s, unmarried, ruling alone in a dynasty where women traditionally rule with men, not instead of them. She's breaking the pattern. For 3 years, Berenice rules. She finds a husband, several, actually. The first dies mysteriously. The second she executes herself when he proves incompetent. She's not looking for a partner. She's looking for a political prop. But Rome remembers who the legitimate king is. And Rome wants a weak, manipulable Ptolemy XII back on the throne, not his strong, independent daughter. In 55 BC, Roman legions march into Egypt. They restore Ptolemy XII, and the king's first act upon returning, he executes Berenice, his own daughter, the woman who took the throne he abandoned, beheaded without trial, without mercy, because that's what you do to threats in the Ptolemaic dynasty. Even if the threat is your own child, Cleopatra watches this happen. She's 14 years old, and she learns the most important lesson of her life. When you take power, you don't stop until your enemies are dead. All of them. 51 BC. Ptolemy XII dies. Finally, predictably, his will names to heirs, Cleopatra VII and her younger brother Ptolemy XIII. They're supposed to marry because Ptolemaic tradition demands sibling marriage to keep the bloodline pure. They're supposed to rule together, but Cleopatra has no intention of sharing power. Within months, she sidelines her brother husband, takes sole control, rules Egypt like she was born for it. Because she was. But Ptolemy XIII's advisors aren't accepting a female pharaoh. They stage a coup, force Cleopatra into exile, and that's when her younger sister makes her move. Arsinoe IV? She's been waiting, watching, learning from Berenice's mistake. You don't challenge the throne when it's stable. You wait for chaos, for weakness, for opportunity. And Egypt in 48 BC is pure opportunity. When Caesar arrives in Egypt chasing Pompey, the whole situation explodes. Pompey is murdered on an Egyptian beach gift from Ptolemy XIII trying to curry favor with Caesar. Caesar is furious. The gift is an insult, not a gesture. Cleopatra famously smuggles herself back into Alexandria, allegedly rolled in a carpetan, seduces Caesar. Everyone remembers that part, but what they forget is this. While Cleopatra is charming Caesar in the palace, Arsinoe is in the streets raising an army. She declares herself queen, pharaoh of Egypt, legitimate ruler, and she has popular support. The Egyptian people, tired of Roman interference, rally to her. The siege of Alexandria begins. Caesar, Cleopatra, and Ptolemy XIII trapped in the royal quarter. Arsinoe commanding forces outside the walls. It's a civil war, sister versus sister, with the future of Egypt and Rome's access to Egyptian grain hanging in the balance. The siege is brutal. Buildings burn. Thousands die. The great library of Alexandria, or at least part of it, goes up in flames. And in the chaos, Ptolemy XIII drowns in the Nile, weighted down by golden armor, fleeing a lost battle. One rival eliminated, Caesar crushes the rebellion, captures Arsinoe, and here's where it gets interesting. Caesar doesn't execute her, he could. By every standard of Roman and Ptolemaic politics, he should. She led a rebellion against Rome, against Caesar personally. She crowned herself queen in defiance of Rome's chosen client. But Caesar shows mercy, because Arsinoe is young, because executing her might inflame Egyptian resentment, because Cleopatra asks him to spare her sister's life. Or so the story goes. The truth, we don't know. What we do know is this: Arsinoe is dragged to Rome in chains, paraded through the streets in Caesar's triumph, humiliated, displayed like a war trophy. The Romans expect her to weep, to beg, to collapse under the shame. She doesn't. She walks with her head high, silent, defiant, royal. The Roman crowd is stunned. They've never seen a captive queen behave like this, and they pity her. Caesar, reading the mood, releases her, exiles her to the temple of Artemis in Ephesus, alive, unpunished, still dangerous. Cleopatra takes note. For a decade, Arsinoe lives in exile. She's alive. She's safe. She has sanctuary in one of the most sacred temples in the ancient world. But she's not free. And more importantly, she's not forgotten. Because in the ancient world, royal blood doesn't expire. As long as Arsinoe lives, she's a threat. A rival claim to the throne. A figurehead for anyone who wants to challenge Cleopatra. A living reminder that Cleopatra's power is not absolute. And Cleopatra, now secure as Egypt's sole ruler, mother of Caesar's son, lover of Mark Antony, does not tolerate threats. 41 BC, Cleopatra meets with Antony in Tarsus. The famous barge, the golden sails, the seduction that reshapes the Eastern Mediterranean. But in between the romance and politics, Cleopatra makes a request. Kill my sister. Antony complies. He sends orders to Ephesus. Arsinoe is dragged from the temple of Artemis, violating sacred sanctuary, and executed on the temple steps. She's in her mid-20s, maybe younger. Historians aren't certain. She dies the way Berenice died, murdered by family, eliminated because she existed. Because in the Ptolemaic dynasty, survival means killing everyone who might challenge you. Even your sisters, especially your sisters. Cleopatra is now the last one standing. All her siblings dead, all rivals eliminated. The throne completely, finally, hers. And the world will remember her as the only Ptolemaic queen who mattered. But she's not the only one who fought. Not the only one who ruled. Not the only one who deserved to be remembered. She's just the only one who won long enough for history to care. 30 BC. Cleopatra is dead. Suicide by Aspor may be poison. History loves the snake story, but we're not sure. What we are sure of: Rome takes Egypt. Octavian, soon to be Augustus, declares it a personal province of the emperor. The Ptolemaic dynasty ends after 3 centuries, and with it, the memory of its queen starts to fade. Not immediately, but slowly, generation by generation, because victors write history, and Rome's version of history has no interest in celebrating Egyptian queens who challenged Roman power. So Cleopatra becomes a cautionary tale, a seductress, a manipulator, a foreign temptress who nearly destroyed Rome. Not a brilliant politician, not a skilled linguist, not a strategic genius who kept Egypt independent for decades longer than it had any right to be. Just a woman who used sex to control men. That's the story Rome tells. And Cleopatra's sisters? They disappear entirely. Berenice IV, who ruled Egypt for 3 years. Footnote. Arsinoe IV, who led an army against Caesar. Barely mentioned. Cleopatra VI Tryphena, so forgotten we're not even sure she existed as a separate person. The Ptolemaic queens are erased. Not violently, not deliberately, just through silence. Through the slow accumulation of centuries where no one bothers to remember them. Because history decided one Cleopatra was enough. But here's the thing about erasure. It's never complete. In 1926, archaeologists excavating at Ephesus find a skeleton buried near the Temple of Artemis. Female, royal burial goods. Mid-20s. Carbon dating matches the 1st century BC. DNA analysis isn't conclusive to graded samples. Contamination, the usual issues with ancient remains. But the evidence points in one direction. Arsinoe IV, murdered on temple steps, buried in the place she sought sanctuary, found 2,000 years later. It's not proof, not absolute, but it's enough to bring her back into the conversation. And once you start looking for the forgotten queens, you find them everywhere. Inscriptions mentioning Berenice's reign, coins bearing her image, court documents referencing Cleopatra's other sisters. They were there. They mattered. They shaped Egypt's fate. History just stopped paying attention. But modern archaeology is correcting the record. Feminist historians are asking new questions. DNA analysis is revealing family relationships we never knew existed. The Shadow Queens are emerging from the shadows, and their stories are just as compelling as Cleopatra's. Because here's what we're learning. The Ptolemaic dynasty wasn't a story of one great woman surrounded by weak sisters. It was a story of multiple brilliant, ruthless, powerful women all fighting for the same throne. Cleopatra won. She's the name we remember. But the others? They were every bit as formidable, every bit as strategic, every bit as deserving of remembrance. They just had the bad luck to be born into a family where only one could survive. And in the end, none of them did. There's a museum in Alexandria today. Modern building, glass and steel, built on land that was once the Ptolemaic palace. They have a small exhibit on Cleopatra's sisters, coins, inscriptions, a few artifacts. It's easy to walk past. Most tourists do, because they're there to see Cleopatra, the legend, the icon. But if you stop, if you read the labels, if you look at the faces on those ancient coins, you see women who were just as royal, just as powerful, just as brilliant. Women who commanded armies, who ruled kingdoms, who defied Rome itself. Women who lost not because they were weak, but because the game only allowed one winner. And history only remembers the winner. But every time we uncover another inscription, every time we find another skeleton, every time we ask what about the others, we're rewriting that history. We're pulling them back from the shadows. Berenice, Arsinoe, Cleopatra Tryphena, the forgotten queens of Egypt. The women who shaped a dynasty from behind their sister's legend. They deserve better than footnotes. They deserve their own stories. and we're finally ready to tell them. If you love untold stories of forgotten rulers and hidden power, like, share, and subscribe for more legendary history that rewrites what you thought you knew. Because the past is full of women we forgot to remember, and every single one of them has a story worth telling.